the thing that matters here is not whether or not customers are confident in you, the supplier, and your products and your people. It's whether they're confident in themselves. It's a supplier agnostic confidence. And I think that's why Karl and I have stopped everything in our lives to write this book, because I think that's the dimension of confidence that we're all walking past.
My name's Mike Lander, and you're listening to Higgle, the B2B Sales Club podcast, where we bring you actionable insights about sales RFPs, negotiations, and difficult procurement discussions from sales leaders, brand leaders, and procurement leaders. Please subscribe to get updates when new episodes are released. Brent and Karl, thanks ever so much for joining me on Higgle, the B2B Sales Club podcast. It's great to have you as guests.
Mike, it's good to see you again. How are you, man?
I'm very good. I'm very good indeed. It's been a while, Brent.
It has. Yeah.
And
I brought Karl. I brought a friend.
You brought a friend. You've now brought a friend. Exactly.
I actually have one.
Brent, who's your friend? Hello, Karl.
So proud to be Brent's friend and glad to be here. So.
And not only friend, but co-author, I believe, as well.
Very true. Very true.
More of that later. So, yes. Without further ado, introduce yourselves. So, Brent, first of all, who are you? What do you do? And something unusual about yourself.
Oh, there's so much. There's that. What's actually usual would be the better question. Or easy. But howdy, everybody. Brent Adamson. So, for lack of a better way to put it, I've kind of think of myself just like Matt Dixon, my co-author in the Challenger. So we call ourselves sales anthropologists. But I spent the better part of the last 20 years, in fact, even more now at companies like CEB or Corporate Executive Board and Gartner, trying to understand with all sorts of research, what does world-class selling and marketing look like? And Mike, something we'll talk about, Karl and I will talk about a lot of that has led into a deep understanding and study of what does buying look like and how is that evolving? Because in many ways, that's the bigger story.
Definitely.
That's made it out in the world in books like The Challenger Sale, Challenger Customer, lots of HBR articles. CB was bought by Gartner, stayed there for about 5 years, went to a small SaaS company for a little while. I'm out on my own now. And all joking and all hyperbole aside, the work we'll talk about today, I felt was so important and so compelling and so interesting that it was really actually worth literally stopping everything, quitting my job, and writing the next book with Karl. And that book will be out in September. So
amazing.
Yeah.
What's the book called, Brent?
It's called The Framemaking Sale. So very much like the Challenger Sale, this is the Framemaking Sale. And hopefully that title will make a little bit more sense in a few minutes. But you can pre-order it. It's actually out there and available now on all your favorite outlets. The Framemaking Sale with the cover art to come soon. And
brilliant.
And it'll be out in September.
Very good. Look forward to reading it, definitely. And something unusual about yourself.
Everything's unusual about myself, Mike. I think you kind of picked up on that already. I don't know.
Yeah.
I come across as a relatively positive, extroverted person, but I think at the end of the day, I'm just a deeply flawed, dark human being struggling with all sorts of demons. There you go.
So you're like the rest of us, really. Yes.
What it's like, I'm pretty normal. I'm normal like everyone else. I just, I talk about it more, which drives everybody nuts. Yeah.
That's what I like about you, Brent.
Yeah.
So, Karl, over to you. Who are you? What do you do? And something unusual about yourself.
I often introduce myself as a recovering strategy consultant after having spent a number of years in that space, as well as in banking and other large corporate organizations. But ultimately, I found my way to CEB, where I met Brent. And we did quite a good deal of research into these topics. I also was a practice leader over a number of other programs, including corporate comms, R&D, et cetera. And so more of the running the research engine was more of what I was doing at CEB and Gartner. Actually had retired, or at least tried retiring, and was playing a lot of chess.
Excellent.
That was something I very much loved. That's probably the bit of an unusual thing. And I got far enough along in that journey that I got to the top 1% on chess.com and from a rating perspective. But being in the top 1%, you just see how massive the gulf is from you to a master, let alone a grandmaster, let alone Magnus.
Interesting.
So Brent rescued me from that by saying, hey, Karl, wouldn't you like to get the gang back together and do some of the exciting stuff we used to do? I'm like, Brent, that seems like a much more worthy and useful purpose than what I'm doing right here. So here I am.
Brilliant. I was just thinking in my head, because I'm a big vinyl fan, so I collect vinyl. I was thinking of the Blues Brothers getting the band back together.
Exactly, yeah.
I was wondering where that was going to go.
Oh, yes.
By the way, Mike, I should tell you, and just be very careful in this conversation, because it's very difficult to argue with someone who's extremely good at chess because they're always 4 steps ahead of you. And you only realize later, it's like, you did that, didn't you?
Exactly.
Oh, no, I'm not so Machiavellian as all that, am I? Really?
I don't know. He's doing it right now. He's literally doing it right now.
Yes, exactly. That's right. Anyone that's not read The Prince should read The Prince. Exactly.
Art of War.
The Art of War. Exactly. By Sun Tzu.
Oh, man.
Precisely.
Yeah.
There we are. So, without boring our audience completely about three guys just having a chat, how about some topics? So, the topics we thought about to discuss were the first is, why must salespeople in this market be helping prospects solve for customer self-confidence in helping them choose the bigger, higher impact solution? Who wants to kick off?
Let me start off just by giving you a quick sort of idea, and then Karl can elaborate, Karl, if you want. But the idea comes from a huge body of research that we started conducting actually way back in the CEB days, and then carried on at Gartner, and it's continued to carry on since then. But Mike, as part of that, we've been trying to understand for years now, with all the different researchers we've worked with, what are the different attributes or factors, if you will, that contribute to what we call a high-quality, low-regret sale. That's simply a sale where a customer agrees to buy the bigger solution with the broader scope, the higher price point, and feels good about it at the same time. It's kind of like the Holy Grail. It's a thing that ultimately, whether you're a small company, founder-led, or a large enterprise, is the thing we all care about, because that's what's going to drive growth, whether it's with new customers or existing customers. How do we increase the likelihood of them buying bigger?
And not regretting it.
Well, exactly. And not if you're saying, I bought what? Right. It's kind of like you remember that first time you bought a home and you wake up the next morning, you're like, oh God, that was a really bad idea. Exactly. But in any case, we've run everything through a number of statistical models over the years, trying to understand those factors that increase that likelihood by the greatest proportion. And marketing attributes, content attributes, seller skills, engagement strategies, even actually attributes on the customer side. How many people are involved in the buying group? Just anything and everything we could think of, including a bunch of challenger stuff. What we found at the end of the day was that there was one attribute that by far outperformed everything else by literally, not to be wonky about it, an order of magnitude. So everything else was like, it's a 60% bump or a 10% bump or a 5% bump. This was a 10x bump, like literally 900% bump. And it was just, nothing else came close. And what that factor was the degree to which customers report a high degree or a high level of what we call decision confidence, which is simply to what degree are customers confident in the decisions that they're making on behalf of their company, which in some ways kind of feels kind of sort of like, oh, of course, that makes sense, right? If customers aren't confident in the decisions they're going to make on behalf of their company, they're going to decide not to decide. Yeah. Where the story takes a left turn and we can explore a little more is when you sort of unpack the dimensions of decision confidence, the things that so tell me, what is this confidence? Exactly. That's where the story takes this really interesting left turn. But that's where it all kind of, the high level lesson out of that though is what it's come to sort of lead me to conclude is we need to run everything through the lens of customer confidence. So as we think about how we engage with customers, the content we create, the engagement strategies we build, to what degree are those, all of those different attributes or strategies or techniques, are they solving for customer confidence? That's the North Star of B2B sales.
Brilliant. So Brent, I'm going to come back to this during the discussion. I'm going to go over to Karl in a second. Two things are in my head, which I'm now trying to work out. Hopefully we'll explore. One, what steps do you take to create customer confidence? So systematically, what does a salesperson do? Yep. And then secondly, and by far more importantly, is how would I spot that the customer confidence index, if I had a little barometer...
That's such an interesting question,
has gone from 1 to 9. How would I know?
The first thing we got to understand is, what does confidence even mean in the first place, right? Yeah. So,
Karl, over to you.
So if you think about what it is, because we're really talking about a specific kind of confidence here, we're talking about decision confidence, right? It's the confidence that we're making the right decision on behalf of our company that will advance, our own personal standing as well.
Let's say it's $500,000 we're going to spend of the company's money, and let's say we're the CIO, for example.
Precisely, because these types of decisions are career altering for the people who are responsible for them. And that's where some of the early data we found related to this really looked at this question of emotional connection. We think about brand connection in the B2C space all the time, and especially for your listeners who are more in the marketing agency world, that shift to think about those same types of dynamics in a B2B world, we first studied well over a decade ago and found those connections between a buyer and a brand in the B2B space actually are much higher when you measure them from a psychological connection perspective. And it's that aspect of how much we put at risk as that CIO making that big ticket purchase, that's career defining. That's going to determine whether or not you are successful and in your job. Or if it goes badly, you may be out on the street.
Quick question, just diving into that a little bit. I won't say delve into, because that's what an AI would do. But just talking about that a little bit more. It might do, might not. Brent's quizzically looking at me. So, how much of that, just out of interest, if you have the research, how much is based around emotion and how much is based around rationality? In the B2B sales world, we were taught that it's about rational, logical, value creation, ROI models, frameworks. And the emotional bit was almost kind of trained out of many of us because it's a rational purchase. It's $500,000. It's big ticket. Does emotion play any part in this?
Oh, huge. Yeah. In fact, there was some work we partnered with Google on, and there's still a white paper floating around out there called From Promotion to Emotion that we published specific. We'll be looking at data on this topic. And we found that the emotional aspect of it, this meeting of psychological needs, ends up being absolutely critical. Yes, you have to prove the business value.
Yeah.
But largely that's table stakes.
Necessary, but not sufficient.
Exactly. And if you don't have this psychological need met, then the deal doesn't get done. And that's where confidence becomes the critical psychological need. Because as we studied within that suite of psychological needs, what's the one you absolutely have to have? That's where confidence absolutely rises to the top, which is why it's the focal point of our book.
So just define, when we say decision confidence, can you just describe what does that mean?
Let's make it super concrete, because once you lay it out, there's two sort of conclusions to kind of corroborate and back, sort of flesh out what Karl's saying. Is super interesting. So Mike, the dimensions of confidence that matter most are things like this. So the actual attributes that sort of bubbled up and sort of made this, that led to this finding, is things like, as from a customer's perspective, how confident are we that we've even asked the right questions in the first place? How confident are we that we've done sufficient research on this topic? And by the way, think about in the world we live in today, there's no end to the amount of research. There's always another white paper. Yes. There's always another website. There's always another calculator, right? So it's like, how much is enough? When do you stop? How confident are we that we've thoroughly examined the alternatives? And in a world where those alternatives are changing very rapidly because of AI, again, it's like, I better wait because another 3 months this could be different. So when do you stop? How much is enough? And there's two things that are interesting about this question, Mike, or these attributes. One is, notice, picking up on Karl's point, let me back up. When we hear this word confidence, I think the reaction from a lot of suppliers is, I totally agree. Seems kind of self-evident. If customers aren't confident, they're not going to buy. That's why we need to make them more confident. So Brent, we're on board. Say something new and interesting, right?
We're going to make you more confident. We are.
Right. So, but then notice how it is. Like, well, here's what we're going to do. Is it clear? That's why we need to be a thought leader. That's why we need to be a trusted advisor. That's why we need to be and so notice that what we're solving for is like, see, yes, customers have to be confident in our product. They have to be confident in our brand. They have to be confident in our people. So that's why we're going to show them lots of, to your point, objective evidence that they can be confident. So here's the math, here's the business case. And when you look at these dimensions of confidence, you find it's a completely different story. How confident, there's two things. How confident are we to ask the right questions, did sufficient research, thoroughly explored the alternatives? First one is this. If I begin to ask you, all right, Mike, okay, so my customers have to be confident they ask the right questions. Got it. All right, which questions are the right questions? Are these the right questions or are those the right questions? I don't know. It's like, what if you think those are right? I think these are right. Who's right? Who's right about right? I don't know, right? So these things get really muddy and you kind of work down the list. Like, well, how much research is sufficient? Is it 2 hours? Is it 2 weeks? Is it 2 days? Is it 2 months? Is it a team of 10? What does thorough mean? And what you find is when you look at all of these different attributes that specifically create this huge opportunity to drive sales, you find none of them have an objective finish line. They're all subjective, right? They're not based on what I know. We're trying to create customer confidence by building what customers know. And what you ultimately realize is that none of these things are actually knowable. Right. And so at the end of the day, what you come to realize is customers don't know those are the right questions. They feel they are. They believe they are. And so much of B2B commerce is based on this idea of building a customer a feeling of confidence. And then the second of the two attributes that's really interesting about this is then when you look at those different feelings, how confident are we that we ask the right questions and so on down the list.
When we say, how confident are we we've asked the right questions, are you talking about how confident is the customer that they've asked the right questions?
Correct.
Rather than the salesperson saying, have I checked off all the questions on my
100%.
discovery
Have
call?
I worked through my BANT framework or my
Exactly.
MedPick framework
Medic
or whatever it is?
might be.
Right.
Yeah.
But the customer's on the other side of the table, the other side of the Zoom call or whatever saying, I'm not even sure. It's not like, I'm not sure you're the right supplier or I'm not sure this is the right price. They're asking, I'm not even sure if I'm even looking at the right thing or even asking the right question. I mean, think about the decisions you make as a consumer, like buying a new home or, I recently had to put my parents in assisted living, which is a long story. That's, I literally didn't even know what questions to ask in the first place. Like I'm making huge commitments on behalf of my parents for the rest of their days, literally. And I don't even know what questions to ask. Yeah. And so how am I supposed to make this decision? Do you see what I'm saying? And someone comes and says, well, we're the best assisted living facility for these three reasons. Like, well, that's what you think.
That's what you think.
But what do I think? And I don't know what to think. And so that's the other point of confidence, that it turns out that the thing that matters here is not whether or not customers are confident in you, the supplier, and your products and your people. It's whether they're confident in themselves. It's a supplier agnostic confidence. And I think that's why Karl and I have stopped everything in our lives to write this book, because I think that's the dimension of confidence that we're all walking past. You hear confidence say, we're on it. Then you unpack this little story a little bit and you realize, oh, we're focused on whether or not customers are confident in us. We're not even thinking about whether customers are confident in themselves. And that opens up this entire new opportunity to think about how we're engaging with customers in such a way that we're solving for that. And that's super interesting.
Let me give you and again, Karl, perhaps respond to see if this makes any sense. Simple use case. Me as a consultant, I sell my services to, let's say, marketing agencies, which I do. What I'm finding is I might have, I don't know, in a month, I might have 50 conversations. What I'm finding is that, and I think it has changed over 5 years. I spend quite a lot of time now helping my customers think about the problem. So I've got this thing, it's really simple. It's the Einstein thing. I help them think through, are we asking the right questions around the right problem statement way before we do any work? I don't think it's a science for me. Yeah, I've got some frameworks and experience, but I spend quite a lot of time. It's never paid for. It's all around helping them think through, is it the right kind of problem? And then eventually what seems to happen is clients start working with me. And it's almost like there's no real proposal at that point. It's been an evolution over 3 months to 3 years of discussions that end up in and I might say, the timing was right. Or, that became a priority issue. I don't really know what's happened, but it seems to be that's the buyer journey. Karl.
Yeah, and that leads nicely to, I think, the next topic we were hoping to talk about, which with confidence being the primary goal to get these high quality, low grade deals accomplished. And the question is, what's standing in the way of that?
Yes.
There are sort of 4 core challenges that customers need to overcome. And what you're talking about actually does a nice job of addressing one of the most important ones, which is this question of the challenge of objective misalignments. Because if that buyer, and in your case, it sounds like you're maybe talking to an individual, but ultimately there will be a consensus dynamic within the vast majority of B2B purchases. And our research has shown just how big that has become, with the average number of people involved in these things now being well over 11 in a typical complex B2B purchase.
So basically, I typically sell to CEOs and presidents.
Yep.
What I'm finding is they have to get alignment with their CFO and their sales director. And if there is a CPO involved, then clearly the CPO as well. It is getting more complex as a syndication. And I know because people say to me, I've been ghosted, Mike. I'm like, you've not been ghosted. They're like, no, I have. They're not responding. I'm like, no. They're not ghosting you. They're just not aligned.
Exactly. And that's why that being one of these 4 critical challenges, and we'll list the others in a minute, but what you're talking about in terms of working with that individual over time to make sure they're going after the right problem, that they've really identified what is the objective they're trying to achieve, and then working through that process, not just for that individual, but through that collective group of decision makers to make sure there's alignment on it. Because so often we hear these really painful stories of deals that the seller thought they was at the finish line, only to find out that they were actually the number 1 solution to that organization's number 3 problem.
Exactly.
And that's where you
the number 1 solution to the number 3 priority problem.
Yeah.
And it just vanishes.
Yeah.
Deals just go into the ether.
You had the win from the corner office, but the deal doesn't close.
So that's number one. So one is
and this is
alignment.
Mike, it's going back to the confidence point. This is the idea that we're not, it's like, Mike, you had me at hello. We're confident in you. We're confident in your ability to help us. We're just not confident that we agree that this is the right thing to go after right now. Do you see what I'm saying? Which is exactly what you're talking about. And so this idea of the language you used, which is how do I help them think through this? And so again, we can get to these others. The point being there's a number of different challenges that customers face today that all undermine their confidence pretty significantly, whether it's decision complexity, information overload, this is objective misalignment, there's outcome uncertainty. So our opportunity in this kind of environment is to help them feel more confident in their ability to navigate these different challenges. So exactly what you laid out is like, how do I help them feel more confident that they've identified the right objective, the highest priority objective, that they defined it clearly and they're aligned on it such that when they see my solution, they don't just think it's valuable in the abstract, but it's valuable in context and it's relevant and it makes sense. And what you've done there in helping them think through, again, your language I liked, is you've engaged in an act of what we call frame making, which is taking something that's big and hard and overwhelming, like I don't even know what to do. And do you? Like, it's so hard. It's like, let me help you just kind of take this thing that's big and hard and overwhelming and just narrow it down, put a frame around it and make it feel so much more manageable so that you feel more confident that you are aligned and you are moving in the right direction. And that is an act of this whole sort of engagement strategy we lay out in this book called frame making, which is taking something hard and overwhelming, just feel more manageable. And there's all sorts of tactical ways to do this. Depending on which of the challenges you're trying to address, you can do that in different ways. But that at a high level, that's what we're talking about.
Brilliant. So, Karl, there were 4, you said. So we had one, if I'm right, this is alignment of objectives. So that's one.
Right. We generally describe them in the challenge that the customer faces.
Yes.
So we would characterize this one as objective misalignment. There's information overload because, again, so much content, we're all swimming around.
Back to Brent's point, how much is enough? Yep.
Exactly. There's decision complexity. Often if the buyer hasn't bought something like this before, they don't even know how to proceed within their organization, who needs to be involved, who needs to approve. And then finally is this question of even when you've got everything else in place and you've convinced them of the value of your solution, there remains uncertainty about that outcome, because we can mess up the implementation. Yep. Again, how we assess that ultimate result, there's a lot of challenges there as well.
And also, Karl, I think the outcome certainty, we live in an imperfect world all the time. There are many things from the outside that impact the decision we've made partway through the journey. World events happen, trade barriers, all sorts of things happen, which can drastically affect the decision that we've made at that time 3 months down the line. And that makes us feel nervous. Brent, this kind of the frame maker. So if I'm a salesperson and I'm in a company that say there's, say we're 100 million turnover, I'm one of the salespeople, I've got a budget of 2 million a year of sales, average order value is 200K, 10 deals a year, something like that. And I'm starting to see this kind of problem about not closing as many as I used to, taking a lot longer, deal values are going down. This kind of like the essence of your book. What's the advice? What do you say to salespeople to say, okay, given a salesperson's now going, this is like, okay, what do I do about it? What do they do practically?
It's interesting, Mike. For those who know the Challenger Sale and have read the Challenger Sale, there's this moment in the Challenger Sale.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. 15 years on, and it's still, I think, highly relevant in so many different ways. But the heart and soul of the Challenger Sale is this belief that ultimately, if you're going to share insights and ideas with the customer that challenge their thinking, show them new ways to make money, save money, mitigate risk, what that ultimately means is you effectively have to know the customer's business better than they know it themselves. At least that part of the business speaks to your capabilities. And maybe just because Karl and I are sort of just, sadistic that way and want to keep the bar really high on sort of ability, the Framemaking Sale has kind of the same sort of belief in it, which is you kind of have to know the customer's business better than they know it themselves in this sense. If your opportunity, if not your job, certainly your opportunity is help customers feel more confident in themselves, you need to better understand the obstacles that are going to reduce that confidence and help them anticipate them and overcome them or maybe avoid them altogether than they can themselves. So let's take something like decision complexity, right? Decision complexity is all about the fact that, customers are working through a deal with you that maybe they're excited to buy. They see your value. They're ready to go. And then all of a sudden the capital review board gets involved and puts the kibosh on the whole thing. And they didn't even know they had a capital review board, or the procurement gets involved, asks a bunch of questions. They don't have an answer. So the next time they go on this buyer, that journey, they think, I got burned the last time. I'm not even sure. I don't even know who to talk to my company. This is why we can't have nice things. They get really frustrated. Our company's so dysfunctional. And what they really need effectively, Mike, is like a coach, almost like a buying Sherpa, someone to sort of take them by the hand and help them understand what are those obstacles? What are the ways this could go sideways? What are the ways it could get stuck inside my own company that what am I not thinking about that I should? What that means is there's this opportunity for a seller to have that kind of knowledge. The customer's like, there's a whole riff in the book about it. The customer calls you, turns out that we argue it's the 4 worst words you can hear in sales when your customer says,
it turns out that.
Turns out, it's like that relationship. So your conversation starts with, we need to talk. It's all downhill from there, right?
Not
it's like,
you.
Right. It turns out like when you're like in high school, they say it's not you, it's me. It turns out it really was me. It's like, it's actually the other person, right? It's like, but the thing is, I often tell people on stage is when your customer says, it turns out that the capital review board, or it turns out whatever they say next, they're genuinely usually pretty surprised. We didn't know this was going to happen. We're so frustrated. But chances are pretty good that whatever they say next, you as a seller have heard it before. It's like, let me guess. Procurement's going to let me guess. I bet I can guess their questions. But you know what that represents, Mike, is not only does that represent an asymmetry of information, it represents opportunity, right? Because if you can actually anticipate these obstacles, why would you not give your customer a heads up? Say, hey, by the way, we love the phrase, we talk about it a lot in the book. We love the phrase, in working with other customers like you.
What we find is...
Right, exactly. You got it. You nailed it, right? And I think we may have talked about this the last time we did one of these, right? But in working with other customers like you.
I think I was taught, Brent, from your book, for the Challenger Sale at KPMG, brilliant phrase, which I still use today. What we find in situations like yours, in your industry, is that they face 3 kind of like problems. And I'm wondering which of those 3, if any, are relevant to you. And they go, how did you know? How did you? It's number 2. That's uncanny.
Right. And notice there's 2 things going on here. One is, here's what I'm not doing. I'm not showing. If I show up, Mike, and say, hey,
your problem is,
I've been doing this for 30 years and I've seen everything. And what I could tell you is that what you need to do is X. Whether that's accurate or not doesn't matter, because what we found in our research is that actually does damage. And if you think about why it actually makes sense, is if I show up as the expert, just tell you what to do, I'm solving for your confidence in me. Trust me. I'm not solving for confidence in you, which is trust you. Whereas if I do what you suggest and build this off of social proof, other customers like you in similar industries, and then I say it's one of these 3 things and a set of degrees of freedom within which they can choose the thing that matters most to them, I've offered up a level of agency that allows them to be confident in their choice as opposed to be confident in me, the sales rep, if that makes sense.
Exactly right. Now, I'm conscious of time. We could double this.
Hours we can go on.
We might do part 2. Who knows?
Should. Yeah.
If you had to boil this down into the essence, just 2 things that you'd say to salespeople with those kind of 2 million targets or sales leaders with bigger targets, what are the practical things in this market based on your research and the book that you've launched? A couple of things from each of you that you think they should be thinking about or doing, Brent.
First of all, pre-order the book. So there you
Definitely.
go. So absolutely. Was that not obvious, right? But the book is called...
you missed it, listeners,
right.
Pre-order the book.
Yeah, the Framemaking Sale is the name of the book, and you can find it on all the outlets. But joking aside, one of the things that's kind of exciting but also frustrating in a podcast like this, Mike, is in the book has got a lot of subtleties to it, right? There's a lot of what we call false positives. There's a lot of, you hear this at a sort of a superficial level. Say, oh, of course, confidence. Yeah, we do that already. And then every chapter's got what we call a head fake in it. Every chapter takes something that feels obvious and dismantles it and shows you the problem with it. Customer centricity, value selling. There's a number of these different thought leadership. There's all these things that are these sacred cows of selling. We unpack in this really detailed way and show you how none of them are designed to solve for customers' confidence in themselves the way that we think they might be. So, and then what to do about it. So I hope people are excited about the book. The other thing, it kind of goes back to your question you were asking me earlier about how do you help customers in this frame-making manner? It means we have to do a better job of understanding what's undermining customers' self-confidence now. If there's one thing you really want to understand, what are the obstacles that are going to get in the way of their decisions that we haven't anticipated? What are the questions that are going to rise from not just your information, but all the content out there? And how's that going to overwhelm them? What content are they even looking at? And we go through all these steps in the book, but there's It's a take your sales hat off for just a moment and put on your buying hat and identify what are all the ways this is going to be hard for customers and how can we help them? It's a different, I'll let Karl talk about this, but really what it means is it means shifting your mindset more than anything else, which I know is maybe, I wanted to call them on Tuesday at 9:00 as opposed to when I want that super in the weeds tactical thing. That's the phrase, if you're working with other customers like you, I think is a very tactical way, but there's a higher level idea here, which is shifting your mindset of how you even think about your role.
Brilliant. I completely agree. I think our role when we're selling, I've thought for many years, is we're the guide. In the story arc, we should be the guide to the customer with the knowledge, the Yoda, of what this journey might look like. Every journey is different, but there are a number of paths that you might go down which have certain consequences. Let's explore those paths. So Brent, I think that's brilliant. Karl, 2 things from you.
Building on the journey point, and this recognizing a number of your listeners are going to be in the agency space or marketing more broadly. Chapter 9 was focused on what's the role of marketing and all this. And one of the critical aspects there is, again, this sorting through what the journey needs to look like. And that journey, often we traditionally there's a tendency to have a very supplier-centric view of a buyer journey, right? Yep. Awareness of our brand, et cetera. Right. And there's been some shifts.
Awareness, interest, desire, and action, I think, was the thing we were always taught.
Exactly. And over time, I think people came to appreciate how supplier-centric that is and shifted some of those to awareness of the problem and attempt to make it a little bit more customer-centric. But what we're talking about here goes a whole layer beyond that, because we're talking about that whole question of, well, what is the customer really struggling with? What are their challenges? And that's where doing those assessments, doing those deep dives into the deals that stalled, right? That customer who asserts, yes, you have the best solution. Yes, clearly I see the value. Clearly this is a win-win for my company and a deal that should be done. And the data shows that these days, roughly half of those deals, even when they assert you're the best solution, roughly half still die to no decision, right? And the question is why? And it's where did the confidence erode? Where was it not sufficient to have that person actually be willing to raise their hand and say, yeah, you know what? I'm willing to risk my career. I'm willing to stake my own personal capital in making this thing happen, because that's a far higher level of confidence than what we see in anything B2C or anywhere else. And because you need that, you really need to dive into those deals that are stalled and build that buyer journey around the questions that customer needed to ask and get answered to develop that confidence, because it's something there that got missed along the way that we need to discover and then arm our commercial team, our sellers and our content and everything else to address specifically those types of questions.
Karl, Brent, it's been amazing. I knew it would be. It's been fun. It's been very insightful. And it's completely taken me back to, we have all these frameworks as sellers, and then we bluntly forget it's about the buyer's confidence in the decisions they're going to make.
Let me, Mike, if I could, I'll sum it all up. I know we're at time, so just 2 quick thoughts to kind of put it all together. The first of all, as this comes out, and just like very much like Capital Challenger, people are going to start referring to this as a methodology, right? And we don't think of it as a methodology. We think of it as just an approach, an engagement strategy. Here's a really powerful way to engage customers. It doesn't go end-to-end across the whole process and talk about negotiations, although it has implications there. But the reason why we think of it as a mindset. And the mindset is the what we call the frame-making mindset comes from a CEO of a big cloud computing company we talk about a lot in the book that we've come to know really well and respect the heck out of. He's one of the smartest commercial leaders I've ever met. And I heard him say this once to his team, and with his permission, we've adopted it, which is, it's this simple phrase. We have one job in sales, and for that matter, marketing. Our job is to help our customers make the best decision they can in as little time as possible. That's right. It. And if you sort of start with that as your North Star, how do we help our customers make the best decision they can in as little time as possible? If you were telling me, what if that best decision is someone else? Well, that's why the second part's important, like in as little time as possible. But as he tells his team, it's like, even if they choose not to go with us, they're going to remember that kind of posture. They're going to remember that kind of interaction. They're going to remember the way we made them feel about themselves. And the next time they need to choose, we're going to be the first ones they call. And the data backs it up that if you can be an instrument for helping people in this world, did I say people? I meant customers, but people. Do you see how this like sort of morphs into like just a better worldview? Yep. What if we all take it upon ourselves as our opportunity to go out into the world, in this case, the commercial world, and just help people feel a little bit more confident in themselves, and goodness happens. And that's, I think, really the higher level sort of really positive and optimistic aspect of this book as well.
Brilliant. Brent, Karl, thanks for taking the time today. It's been a real pleasure. First of all, just remind people, what's the book called?
The Framemaking Sale.
And it's available for pre-order now.
Yep.
I recommend to everyone they should definitely pre-order it. I'm not on commission at all.
But we could talk about that if you want to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Would you like to be on commission, Mike?
Of course, always.
Well, maybe there's something there we should discuss.
But it's genuinely, having looked at your previous works, I'll be buying it for sure. And where can they find out more about you? Brent, where can they find you?
Well, I think the best way to find us, so we've created a company, which will, for those who know Challenger, will sound very familiar. We call it A to B Insight. This whole idea of breaking down the A and building up the B. The company is a2binsight.com. We're just setting up, the book will be out in September. We're literally in the process right now of building up the book website, which will, if I remember right, it'll be well, I won't tell you because there's about 3 different versions. We got to choose one. So, but it'll be something like framemakingsale.com or something like that. But you can, and of course, where we are very active, and I should say, is on LinkedIn. In fact, Karl and I are doing a weekly show on LinkedIn where we're just sharing some of sort of like we keep thinking they're 5-minute videos and they turn out to be 12-minute videos, but short videos of where we sort of unpack different aspects of the book and some of those insights. And that's happening regularly on LinkedIn. So check us out there.
Perfect. Karl, yep. Brent, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you so much, Mike. Be well, man.
You too. Thanks for listening to Higgle, the B2B Sales Club podcast series with your host, Mike Lander. Please subscribe so that you'll catch all the next episodes.